Hey everyone, I'm David Benites from Extreme Vocal Institute, and this is Dave Dunsire, and we're here at Sweetwater to test out some handheld microphones for live performance. We're going to be testing out all sorts of metal vocals with these, screaming, singing, the works, to see how all 10 of these mics handle really high energy, high intensity sounds, so you guys can make choices for yourselves at what to try for yourselves.
I'm going to be giving some information on the mics as we go through, and we're going to crack into it.
Let's just jump right in. What can you tell me about this first one right here?
So this first mic is the SE-V7 Super Cardioid. It's a dynamic handheld. It's a really popular microphone. It's very popular in metal right now. Very sturdy construction, super cardioid. It's got a pretty tight pattern, but it's going to offer a little bit more side rejection, which is really, really great, especially when you're getting up in the microphone. Yeah, the red's cool, and it's very, very lightweight too. And I like this interesting kind of more like the pattern with all these straight edges along the side, almost like a gear. Oh yeah, and it's got like a 40 to 19 hertz frequency range, so it's going to get like a lot of lows and like a lot of highs.
That's cool, and I can hear what's going to be coming through this in a second because I've got on my 64 audio, my U6Ts, and which is what I've been using on tour as well. So I can kind of hear what it sounds like from my perspective, and you guys will hear a little bit of what this is going to sound like when you're using this in an actual space yourselves. Let me make some sounds into this and see what I can do. Yeah, oh, definitely really crisp. I get that like immediately, a lot of like right on the top end, kind of right into my ears, and I can imagine that's helpful in a live setting. In terms of getting these kinds of sounds to interact with the rest of the music and make it so the audience is really hearing everything. Even in the low end. Oh! All around the spectrum, yeah, a lot of that bright intensity, and not as much in the low end I'm noticing, but it's definitely a really cool sizzly sound. Let me try that with some music and see what we can do.
We've endured the disaster before. Just remember that destruction is the key to becoming more. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the abyss. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
It's really light. Like I feel like I can kind of move around totally freely because it's almost like it's not there. Really cool in terms of the high end. Yeah. Sick, SE. This one I recognize because this is what I've been using for a while. Tell me a little more about it, Dave.
Telefunken M80, it's another super cardioid dynamic microphone. This one's got a frequency range of 50 to 18 hertz, and it comes in a lot of really cool colors, which is really sick. And it's got a pretty high SPL, so pretty popular with metal.
Yeah, I can definitely handle a lot of the louder sounds from what I've come to understand. And I like the metal body. It's definitely really heavy compared to other mics, but for me, I kind of like that, so I remember I have something in my hand, so I'm a little more in control of my movements, because sometimes when I've used other mics, I've hit myself in the face a couple times, and I know I'm not the only one. So I like that, and the way you can kind of customize these colors and just kind of how this one pops is really nice. And when I make sound into this one, I can hear that there's a little bit of that high-end bump in there. It's definitely a more subtle one, and the cool thing is I'm hearing way more mid and low range too, so I'm kind of hearing more stuff accounted for across the board, so there's, even in my ears, a little more kind of depth. And sometimes, depending on how much sound is getting pumped into your ears or like how much is going out there, that might kind of get in the way a little bit, and you might need to peel a little bit of that back. But if you want it, it is there, and that's pretty sick.
Whoa! Yeah, yeah, yeah!
Which is cool because, say for like a high scream, you can hear a lot of like the deeper tones that exist within it. And that adds some extra intensity to it.
No! Oh! Whoa!
And then for some kind of added differential for when you're going into some distorted singing versus cleaning it up a little bit. Let me try it with the song. Let's see what happens.
We've endured the disaster before. distraction is the key to becoming. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the obvious. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
Cool range of stuff there, that's awesome. What am I looking at? It looks like the capsule is just floating in midair in this thing. What's going on here?
So this microphone is the Austrian Audio OD505.
Okay.
This is kind of a special one. It's an active dynamic microphone.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so essentially it just offers better feedback rejection and higher sensitivity. So it's kind of like you fuse a condenser microphone with a dynamic microphone, and it kind of has a little bit of the best of both worlds. So it's a pretty unique design amongst handheld microphones.
Yeah, and I would be worried about, like, say, if I were to, like, kind of unknowingly, like, smack into something, or if I were to, like, if anything, like, fall on stage, like, if this capsule bit would actually snap off. But because you've got a metal body here, that actually feels really solid and well constructed. And I know from the Austrian stuff, like, the way the sound kind of comes through is a very unique kind of thing. Let me see what I can get going in my own ears with this.
Yay!
Every time I hear something Austrian, there's like this little twist in like the lower mid-range that's like, I can't quite put a finger on what it is and what it's doing, but it's very interesting just in terms of the way it's kind of crafting the depth and kind of doing this to it and bringing it a little closer to you.
Whoa! Yeah! Oh, wow, 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 wow.
It's so peculiar, but I do enjoy that a lot. I could see myself having a lot of fun with this.
Oh, and it's
that interesting kind of frequency difference is even more apparent with the singing than it is with the screaming, oddly enough. At least that's what I'm hearing. So cool. Let's try this with some music.
With the dark, the disaster before. Just remember, this destruction, this big sound so interesting. This is all that I wanted. There's something missing. Witness the abyss. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
That is so odd, but I do like that. That's fun. This is another one I have definitely not really seen as much before. What do we got going on?
So this is the Electro-Voice ND86. This is actually the first microphone I ever bought, hilariously enough.
No kidding.
Yep, it's another super cardioid dynamic microphone, and it's got an internal shock mount, which is really cool. So it should actually be great for very active vocalists on stage.
Like if you're moving around a lot, you mean?
Yep. It's got the frequency response is 70 to 17, so you should have a little bit duller highs and a little bit less lows. So it should be a little bit smoother in the high end. But it has a very high max SPL of 140, so it should be able to take what you can throw at it.
Yeah, I can even hear what you're talking about. Like if I'm going like back and forth in my hands, I can hear that like there isn't as much like hand noise. Like sometimes when you're holding a mic, if it's really hot, like you can hear yourself handling it, especially if you're switching hands and running around on stage a bunch to really make sure you're performing your best. So that's cool that this has that thing going on internally. Let me make some noises here.
Oh, yeah! Yeah!
Yeah, the smoothness, I hear exactly what you're talking about. I don't hear it as much when I'm in the lower register, but in the upper, even when I'm just talking into this.
And as I progress into singing through it, yeah!
That's a really interesting way that it just kind of curves off a little bit at the end. Let me try this out some more.
We've endured the disaster before. Just remember, this destruction is the key to becoming more. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the obvious. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
Yeah, that's so interesting. There's a little bit of how it smooths it out, so there's definitely a difference in terms of how I hear myself with the music, which is definitely different. But I could see myself getting used to that in terms of like being able to kind of hear all the other stuff coming through in terms of like how that comes together to make up how I sound. Definitely cool. I've got to say, all of these mics have really been surprising me a lot, and I have a feeling this is going to do the same thing. Tell me a little bit about what's going on here and what makes it different.
In front we have the DPA 2028. This is a supercardioid condenser microphone, so this is our first like, full condenser. And these microphones are very high SPL, so it basically you should have way more headroom. Like when you're doing lows and when you're really belting, like you should feel like there's still like tons of headroom there.
Interesting. Like I'm not like hitting the wall already kind of thing?
Exactly, yeah. And these are just super beefy microphones in that regard.
Yeah, I've never used like a handheld condenser. I've heard a lot about them, but in terms of like metal and rock stuff, like sometimes I'm a little afraid of what that would mean, like using something like this in context, because you're used to like thinking a condenser is like, oh God, like I have to baby this so much. Like especially with so many of the microphones that we did in the last video we did together here, like so many of those mics are such like delicate, incredible instruments, like pieces of art, like you wouldn't want to roughhouse them. But holding this, it looks like they've taken that into consideration in terms of like it being stable and it actually feeling a lot lighter weight than I thought it would, considering the amount of extra stuff that's going on in here compared to like a regular, like a dynamic mic versus a handheld condenser. Let's see what all the fuss is about. Immediately the headroom thing. That is an interesting experience.
Whoa! Wow! Whoa!
It's such an odd thing. I can hear myself just fine. It's not like it's quieter, but I could hear that I could really go for it into this and not have to worry about anything at all.
Whoa! Yeah! Yeah! Whoa!
Even proximity-wise, I don't really get that, oh, I'm too close to the microphone, I need to back off kind of thing. So that's really useful, especially because a lot of people in metal like to get up like really close on these things. So that could be something really helpful if that's applicable to you. The real test is going to be the music. Let's see what happens here.
We've endured the disaster before. Just remember, this distraction is the key. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the obvious. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
Wow, that is so unlike anything I've ever used before. Given the wording, you would assume this is the case. It does kind of feel like there's a studio mic in my hands with that difference in clarity. All of them have had really nice clarity to them, but it's just kind of different flavors, if that makes sense.
So the only downside to microphone, to that particular thing, is that if you have a live stage where you have a lot of monitors going, like we're using 64 audio in-ears, if you have a lot of monitor noise, it might be harder to handle feedback with a condenser microphone. But these microphones do have really great feedback rejection, and they have really high SPL. So
interesting, so a little more purpose specific.
Yep.
Good to know, thanks man. Back to some things that I've used in the past. What have we got going on here?
So this microphone is the AKG D5C cardioid dynamic. Now this one has a super low frequency response of 20 hertz to 17.
Oh.
And it has a 160 decibel SPL, which is the same SPL as the DPA. So you should have tons of headroom, and your lows should feel a lot lower.
Interesting. I'm noticing the capsule on this is a lot bigger. So like when I'm holding it, like there's a lot more distance right here. There's a lot more going on in the top part of this. Is that kind of just more stuff going on mechanically to be able to make it so it can handle all that low end? Because that's definitely different for me, having a mic that can handle low end all the way down into that range.
Well, this one also has an internal dual shock mount, so it's going to do a similar thing where it's eliminating those extra vibrations. So
oh, it's both. That's a lot of stuff at once. That's neat.
Let me see what's going on here. Wow.
Even just talking into it, like the low end is woo, like right in your face.
Yeah. Yeah. And with lower distortion, a lot of those undertones really
come through and have some extra intensity to them.
Whoa! Whoa! Oh! Yeah! Oh! Yeah! 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 Yeah!
As I like go down the scream scale, so to speak, I can definitely notice more of it coming through, but it is pleasant in the high end too.
Whoa!
Let's give it a shot.
Wow. Just remember that destruction is the key to becoming. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the abyss. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
That's cool. It's definitely got its own unique flavor. Not so much that it's like distracting by any means, none of them have, but it's definitely its own spice. And I do like that low end. I feel like if you're doing metal or rock that's a little less busy note-wise, like if there isn't as much musically going on, it's a little more straight and narrow, I feel like a mic like this could be great. But if the music was very busy and very chaotic, I can also imagine the low end kind of making it so stuff kind of gets lost. So I would say ever so slightly more purpose-specific based on that. I recognize what we've got going on here, and it looks like we've got another condenser on our hands, right?
Yeah, so this is the Neumann KMS 105. It's another supercardioid condenser microphone. And this one's got a 20 to 20 frequency response, which is the lowest and the highest that we've experimented with yet. It's got a transformerless output, and this is it's going to be a similar thing where it's got a very high SPL, and you should hear lower lows, higher highs, and this microphone has noticeably less what's called self noise. So the microphone itself doesn't generate as much operating noise as some microphones do. So it should be crystal clear.
And sometimes that operating noise I feel like is some of the flavor that I'll notice sometimes, especially with some of the mics in the lineup. So that'll be interesting if this just appears to be more, ooh, that's like really, it's like just my voice is just being beamed into my head, like very powerfully, but there's just nothing extra happening. Like just it is what it is. Where if accuracy is the name of your game, then this is epic.
Epic, 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 epic. Oh!
Yeah, it's so odd. It's not that it's less exciting. It's just like the difference between
Singing with distortion, yeah!
or screaming
Yo!
in a room on its own is so different from doing it like through a mic, through a sound system, like with a band in front of people. It's such a different thing, different experience, and the way the sound is behaving in the room is so different. So the way we hear it in both of these contexts ends up being so different, and this almost resembles exactly what vocalizing like this more intensely is like just in a room on your own. Which is actually something I push a lot for practice for people, being able to like get to know what the sound is like on its own, so that in this context it actually makes more sense. So I can see if you are armed with something like this in your arsenal, that could be really helpful for feeling just consistency across the board with everything you do. Let's see what happens when we add some songs here.
We've endured the disaster before. Just remember, this destruction is the key to becoming more. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? The abyss. Doesn't everyone feel like this?
I can hear what you're talking about with
Anyone feel like this?
it's like the full frequency spectrum is accounted for here. That's definitely, I can feel that it's the widest of everything we've done. But I can also, like, because of how neutral it is, for people that have used very either noisy mics or just mics that they're very used to with their own unique flavor, I could see going to something so neutral taking some getting used to. So if someone was to go for this, I would say to take your time really getting to know it, because it's definitely an adjustment, but there's a lot of really cool stuff here that can make that worth that extra time spent.
Very popular microphone for pop music.
I can see why.
Yeah, a microphone that really has like the widest frequency response possible, and something that is fairly neutral gives your front of house, your mix engineers the ability to really kind of cater that individual sound. Whether they're bringing special preamps and compressors, limiters for the show. So that's a great microphone for that special category, I would say, in itself.
I've seen this one float around a lot in the touring circuit, kind of back and forth, like you see it, then you don't, then you see it again. What do we got going on here?
This is the Sennheiser E945 supercardioid dynamic.
That's right.
So it's another dynamic microphone. It's very popular. This one's got a 40 to 18 frequency response. So, it's got a good balance. You're going to have like a decent low energy, and it's not like absurdly high, so it should be fairly smooth. And it is a pretty popular microphone in the touring circuit.
It's really solid. Like, it's just very kind of middle weight. Like, it doesn't feel heavy to me, and it's not like I hold it and it's immediately light. It's just kind of in the middle. Sound-wise, just both from conversations I've had and experience that I've had, I know if I even talk into this,
Oh, yeah!
There's a lot of high-end excitement in here. Definitely the most of anything we've tried so far, and the most of, I think, anything I've tried in general, where the thing that I've come to understand, if you're using this in like a much bigger type of space, like a lot of people, and you're having to account for your sound needing to slice through a lot of open air and a lot of open sound and a lot of crowd noise, like stuff like this is really, really great. And it really, I like how it emphasizes some of the whistle in the low end. It's cool, and like, for example, sometimes I'll see people using these, like when I'm going to a sporting event and I see people singing the national anthem.
Oh, yeah!
I see them using the Sennheiser stuff like this because it's able to accommodate for the kind of space it's in without a lot of extra stuff being done. That being said, if you have like a brighter voice,
or a higher voice, yeah!
If you're in a smaller space, I can see that definitely being a lot and needing to curb some of that back, but there's definitely a lot of excitement going on here. Let's see what we can do with it.
Just remember, this destruction is okay. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Oneness, the obvious. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this? Feel like this! Feel like this!
The cool thing is, in context, when you have all these other sounds happening, especially like if you're like me, and when you're performing, you like having a lot of what the band is doing in your ears, or if you don't use in-ears, if you like having it in front of you in the monitors, this does help to kind of just place it right in front of everything else without having to do a whole lot extra to it. But I would, again, say it kind of sometimes depends on your voice. I know I have a little bit of a darker voice, so it really depends.
This is a Behringer XM8500. It is a frequency response of 50 to 15. So probably like the least amount of highs of any microphone in this list. Lows should be, kind of normal. It's just a standard cardioid pattern, yeah.
And it's definitely a little on the lighter side compared to some of the mics that we've used, but it's definitely very like neutral, like aesthetically. I could see this just being like, if it's more of like there's lots of mics being involved, if they're kind of being used for a lot of different things, but you kind of almost want it to blend into the background. Like some of the mics that we've used today are pretty extravagant looking, and some of them have really interesting designs I've never seen before. But sometimes, depending on the context, like if it's for like video stuff or like depending on what you want your stage to look like, you don't always want that being the focal point, and this really kind of blends really nicely, this kind of look. And then just very classic. I think this one's really been the only super kind of classic like ball shape to the capsule portion here.
Ah, ooh, ee.
I can hear what you mean.
Ee, ah, ooh, hey, low.
I don't have any trouble hearing myself, but I can hear less going on on either side, which when you're playing with the kind of music we're talking about here with a lot of rock and metal, either like more modern or super not, if it's really throwback, there's just so much frequency stuff, so many different sounds going on, where sometimes you don't really need all that extra anyway, and you can get away with something like this working just fine for you if that's what works and that's what you have access to.
Oh, 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 oh,
But that definitely can work for so many different things. Let's test it.
Why they die, the disaster before. Just remember, just distraction is the key. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the abyss. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
Yeah, it really just sits really nicely in the middle, and I have no issue with the fact that there's a little less on the sides. I noticed that it doesn't sound as big, so maybe I would want a little more of that in my ears if need be, but overall, I like it. It works.
Cool.
And I can see that we have really saved the most iconic and easily recognizable mic for last that I have seen just about everywhere, and I'm sure everyone else has too. Would you like to do the honors? What's this called?
This is the SM58.
Yes,
This is every venue in America's microphone to
Why do you think that is? This continues to be so prevalent everywhere.
Its microphone's been around for a very long time. Shure as a company has been a microphone company since I think about the 50s.
Yeah.
And this has become a bit of the industry standard. And it's a microphone that's at a great price, and we just see them everywhere. It's got a similar spec sheet compared to the last microphone of a 50 to 15.
And just kind of what it can handle?
Yeah, in terms of what it can handle, cardioid, polar pattern. But yeah, that's what we got.
Yeah, and kind of similarly, I just know from experience because especially like if today isn't your first day starting out being a vocalist, singing, screaming, whatever, like if you've done any kind of performing at all, you have probably held one of these in your hands already, although given a lot of different types of venues, there may be a dent or 10 in here. But with that in mind, even then, you see a lot of these kind of mics beaten up so much, and they still more or less work just fine, which is really cool. And I know from my own experience, I've even had to use these every now and again recently when I've done different guest spots on tour, and they work great. They're just fine. Even in a modern context, it's cool that something that's existed for so long can still stand up to all of the different options that we do have today. That being said,
oh yeah! 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 Yeah!
the 58 to me will always have a very specific flavor to it where, like, even not looking at it, keeping my eyes closed, I know exactly what it is. Nothing wrong with that, but I know for a lot of people, comfort is key. And sometimes, like, whatever those first few mics are that you use becomes like what your ears get accustomed to, what your voice ends up getting accustomed to. So something like this could always be home for a lot of different types of people. And because it's so readily available, it's always like a great option, especially like if you're just starting out, at least in my opinion. And again, I can hear that the little on the edges is missing, but again, you can make that work totally fine. Let's test it with some music.
Yeah! We've endured the disaster before. Just remember, this destruction is the key to becoming. This is all that I wanted. Is something missing? Witness the abyss. Wait a minute, doesn't everyone feel like this?
Tried and true, it works, it's reliable, you know exactly what you're gonna get with this guy. And that just about wraps it up with all of these different microphones that we've been trying out today. I'm definitely really surprised by the variety that we have here. Even though technically all of these are doing the same thing, depending on what you're after, the kind of voice you have, like the way your screaming and singing develops, there's a lot of cool options in terms of where you could go and how you can enhance your sound and really get the most out of what you're doing in one direction or another. I've never done anything like this with these kind of down the line. I'm really glad we were able to get down to Sweetwater and do this today, and that they let us do something as ridiculous as this. This was fun.
Heck yeah. Yeah, a very cool experiment and a great resource for people to be able to get an idea of maybe what microphone is going to be best for them on the stage, in the rehearsal room, you know, on any size stage, in any size room.
Yeah, and with that being said, I'm sure you can find all of these different microphones on Sweetwater's website. And if you're more interested in what I've been saying here and more about singing and screaming stuff, you can check out me, David Benites, and Extreme Vocal Institute all over social media, or you can check out our website, extremevocalinstitute.com. Thanks for watching, and if there are any mics we didn't use, leave a comment about some other ones you're interested in, and we may have to do this again. We'll see you real soon.